Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. A chance meeting could change your life. There's a very well-known story of sage Valmiki meeting Narad Muni. Valmiki at the time was known as Ratnakar Daku and had been notorious for his horrendous deeds of stealing and murdering. He lived on the edge of the forest, and his livelihood was attained by robbing anyone passing through the forest. And he wasn't satisfied to just take their wealth. He was quite violent and gruesomely so. Once, when Narad Muni, a great sage, was passing by, Ratnakar was fascinated that this man was so happy. And in his head he thought, well, if he's happy, he must have lots of money. So immediately he threatened Narad Muni's life and asked for the wealth to be given over. Narad Muni had nothing but his veena, a musical instrument, and said, but there's nothing to give you. If you want, you can take the veena. Ratnakar was very suspicious that how can he have nothing and still be so happy. Went ahead to search him and the veena and truly found nothing. And at this point was so frustrated that, because when we build up an expectation that we're going to get a really good deal today and then he didn't, he was even more angry and took it out on Narad Muni. Narad Muni in his compassion looked at this man and said, why do you do this? Why do you steal? Why do you hit, and why are you so angry? And Ratnakar answered, as most would, to bring home money for the children, the wife, the parents. And Narad Muni asked, do you realize how much sin you incur by doing this? And in a very defensive way, Ratnakar said, but it's not for me. The money, I hardly get any of it. All of it goes to the family members, so the sin should be going to them. But it doesn't. When you do an action, you get the result. And since the family members are not doing the actions, they won't have to get the results. The sins belong only to you, Narad Muni explained. And again, in a very defensive way, Ratnakar said, but I think my family would take the sins because they're benefiting from it, so why wouldn't they take it? And as what any wise person would do, Narad Muni smiled and said, why don't you ask them? Because which person would take anyone else's sin? Even someone who ideally love, because none of us want to face negative consequences. Ratnakar now became even more suspicious and thought, you do have money, and you're just trying to get rid of me, and you're just trying to mess with my head. But Narad Muni, very compassionate, said, you can tie me up, go and ask your family members these questions, and come back when you're ready. I won't go anywhere. Of course, as a thief, as a murderer, as somebody who has lived a life of such selfishness, it's not easy to trust or believe in the goodness of someone. So Ratnakar was definitely hesitant to do so. But the thought that his family wouldn't share his heartache and only his joy was pricking at his heart. So he did tie up Narad Muni. He did go back to his family members and he asked each one, do you know what I do? And each one kind of looked away, tried to avoid the question, for they did know, but nobody wanted to acknowledge it or admit it. But he pursued and said, well, do you know it collects sin? Of course we know that. We don't have to go to school to know it. Actions have consequences. Negative actions will have negative consequences. And so then he asked, almost holding his breath, would you take half of my sins, or even a quarter? And none of the family members would. They all did that same uncomfortable look, staring away. The children even said, why should we? It's your job to provide for us. And so however you choose to do it, you have to face the consequences. Anyone would be heartbroken. It doesn't matter how selfish we are. It doesn't matter how many horrible things we've done. When we feel we are not loved, we will feel pain. And this pain was a blessing to Ratnakar because it forced him to see things differently. It forced him to see himself and to evaluate the way he's living his life. Where is he giving importance to and why? He went back to the forest and Narad Muni with this sadness. And with a head bent down in disappointment, Naradji already knew that he had understood. He untied Naradji and let him go. But Naradji, being a man of compassion and love, wanted to help him and said, even though you've incurred all these sins, for you have killed so many people, looted so many times, there is still hope for you. No matter how dirty our minds are, it can be cleaned. No matter how hard our hearts have become, it can be softened. So holding on to this hope, Ratnakar asked what is it he could do. And Naradji initiated him into chanting the mantra of the name of Lord Sri Ram. The story says that he couldn't even say the name Rama because his mind was so impure and the name is so pure. And so he mixed up the syllables and said Mara, which translates to death, because that was something he could relate to at this point in his life. But Mara, 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 the syllables joined and turned around and it became Rama. And because of his earnestness, his desperate need to purify himself, for he did not want to face horrendous consequences that were owing to him, he sat still, closed his eyes, and with single pointed earnesty chanted the name of the Lord. The story continues to say that a year later, when Narad Muni was passing by that same way, he heard the slight sound of the chanting of Rama's name. And he looked around to see where it was coming from, and he saw no person. And he looked further and realized it was coming from an anthill. It would be amazing if ants started chanting, but he knew that was not the case. And so he moved the sand apart and found that this Ratnakar Daku had been chanting the entire year. And he had done so with such sincerity that he was completely cleansed of lower tendencies to want to hurt and loot. He came out of that anthill a new man. He came out no longer as a Daku, as a villain. He came out as a sage and was named Valmiki. The story is told so often in narrations of how powerful a meeting with a saint is. Narad Muni met Valmiki for just a day, but changed his entire life, changed his thinking. Credit goes to Valmiki for his conviction and his daring to change. Credit goes to him for his persistence and his determination that he wanted to turn his life around so completely. But credit also goes to Narad Muni for being the voice of reason and for being the beacon of light that his words had such power, for being the inspiration for Valmiki to change. Just one meeting with such an evolved soul can bring about such a phenomenal transformation. This is the power of Satsang. The next verse in Bhaja Govindam starts with the line Satsangatve Nisangatvam. This word Satsang, loosely translated, means keeping the company of the good. Keeping the company of saints and sages or anyone who is living a noble and pure life. The importance of Satsang we see in the story of Ratnakar Daku becoming Valmiki. It's interesting that Ratnakar's motivation for killing and stealing was love, to provide for his family. Valmiki's motivation was also love for Lord Sri Ram, a form of the divine. Even what we love can change depending on who we're hanging out with. Think about it.